I think the best thing that you can do as a person who likes to exercise is learn to check in with your body and learn what your capacity is for the day. If you're having a really severe symptom day, that is not the day to push it because you're only going to make things worse, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to just lay on the couch with a heating pad and like wait for it to pass. Let's meet your body where it is, see what we have the capacity for, so we don't make it worse.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Thick Thighs Save Lives podcast. I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Rachel. Guys, we have our Dana. She's back. We're so happy to have her. We call her our Dana because she is just the nutritionalist that
We just talked about this.
It's a nutritionist, guys. It's not a nutritionalist.
Do you want me to say it?
Yes.
Oh my God. I hate everything. You know what? I'm out here doing my best, and I got Dana on, so I'm not even worried about nothing because she is going to absolutely give you every single thing that you need to know about all of the normal things of digestion, all of the abnormal things. And she is a dietitian-nutritionist, okay? And she's a body image coach too. She specializes in helping women with gut issues and burnout from a weight inclusive, and non-diet approach. And her philosophy combines neutral nutrition, weight inclusive care, and her training in integrative and functional nutrition. So what we have for you guys is a part 2 here, because if you haven't heard the first one, we had Dana on and she impressed us so much. We didn't even have enough time to get into everything, so we had to have her back. So Dana, thank you for coming back on.
Thank you for the accolades. Thank you for having me here. I'm excited to talk all things poop and gut stuff and workouts and everything like that.
Honestly, it's one of those topics where I'm like, we can't talk about this enough because it's already like underserved. And it's just one of those things that we're like, okay, we're going through this every day. And the constant questions of like me asking myself, like, is this normal? Or like our ladies asking us like, is this normal? Is this something normal that we go through? So I know we introduced a lot to our listeners last time who adored you, but can you just refresh us with a little bit of your background when it comes to coaching women with gut issues?
Yeah, so I wear many hats, which kind of led me to where I am now. So I was always an athlete growing up, and I also started to have some GI issues in college, which kind of contributed to and also was spurned on by what turned into an eating disorder and then some pretty disordered eating patterns even after I was quote recovered from the eating disorder. And in my 20s I had found CrossFit, I found Olympic lifting, and so I had really gotten into that while I was also swim coaching. So I was on the one hand before working in politics and I was like, wow, I hate my life, I need to change this. So I went back to get my master's in nutrition. And because I had had my own history of this kind of combination of eating disorder, disordered eating, body image stuff, and then also the gut stuff on the other side, when you're first learning about all that stuff, there seems like there's a lot of conflicting information on what you should do because information on one side that you're given, if you take that advice, may trigger the stuff on the other side. So I was like, well, hold on. It seems like we're missing the middle of the Venn diagram here. And so that's where I started to specialize. And like you were saying before, it's rare if you find someone with no gut issues, and especially athletes and especially women, because there's such a huge kind of hormonal tie-in as well. And everybody, not just women, everybody is so stressed these days. And I feel like our default state is burnout. Like if you're not constantly burned out, then like you're having a good season of your life. And that can play a really big role in either helping your digestion or hurting your digestion as well. And I think one of the main issues that people run into in trying to figure out, okay, well, what is going on with my gut is if you Google like gut health, you're going to get a million different things to try. And most of them are going to be eliminating foods. And we kind of talked about this on the past episode, but I just wanted to reiterate for everybody is like, unless it's a food allergy or celiac disease, cutting out foods is not going to solve your gut issues. because food is not the origin of the problem. It's more a symptom that something else deeper is going on. And I'm not saying that cutting out foods will not help your symptoms, right? For some people, it does really help once you're able to identify your individual triggers. But then that can't be it, because what, are you just not going to eat strawberries for the rest of your life? I mean, if you're allergic to them, no, you're not going to eat them unless you want to go into anaphylactic shock, which you don't. But if you are having issues with a specific food because it's causing you, whether it's heartburn, indigestion, all of the things on the Pepto Bismol commercial, my job as a dietitian is to figure out, okay, well, why are you having sensitivities to that food in the first place? It's got to be deeper, right? We don't just stop at, okay, maybe let's play around with these different foods and see if adding in some or eliminating some is maybe going to help your symptoms. What's going on at a deeper level? How is your stress connected? How are your hormones connected? How is your liver connected? How are all the different systems of the body connected? And then also, a lot of the time, going straight to stool testing and seeing, what is the composition of your gut bacteria? Is there something in your gut that's not supposed to be there? Because if that's the case, or if you have too much or too little bacteria, no matter what you do with your food, it's not going to fix the root cause issue. So that's where we are.
Yeah, I'm really, really glad that you went ahead and reiterated how, elimination diets have really become the norm. And, last time we had talked about the tests, the food sensitivity tests, and how popular those have become, and how, people are coming back with these 20 some odd things, and they're like, oh my God, how could this possibly all be it? And if you guys haven't listened to the explanation behind that, or why these kind of food sensitivity tests are not really that accurate, Dana goes into it. And I just really think that is so eye-opening that, the underlying, it's never what's on the surface. You know what I mean? There's always an underlying thing. And if we're treating symptoms and not finding that underlying cause, like, what are we doing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And it is important to treat the symptoms as well, right? Because if a lot of the time when a root cause approach is taken, sometimes it can feel like, okay, yeah, we're looking for answers, but we're not doing anything in the meantime. And so you do want to make sure that when you're clinician working with someone, it's like, well, yeah, I don't want you to feel bloated and have the like 9 bowel movements a day. Like, your quality of life is very low right now. So I'm going to do what I can for you to help alleviate those symptoms in the meantime, which is always going to be individual based on person to person. But then also figuring out, okay, while we're doing that, let's figure out why this is happening in the first place and what we can do about that.
Yeah, this is like a weird universe thing happening for me right now, because I have to just say this. This morning, I was talking to one of my friends who constantly has stomach issues. And she was saying, like, I'm having stomach issues again. And I was like, here's the thing. I was like, the amount of days that you have stomach issues is really like way too many, and address this issue. And when she was like talking about it, she's like, well, I don't know, stress. Like, I ate a thing 2 days ago that was like not wildly out of her comfort zone, but she eats this. She's at the point where she's eating the same exact thing every day because she's so nervous of the things that are upset her stomach. And I was like, you're eating the same thing every day and still having an upset stomach. What quality of life is this? It's time to get this under control. So if you are one of those people, I hope that this episode, I know she's going to listen to this because she listens to it every week. So
Hey, friend.
we're going to talk specifically about you, lucky you. But if you're one of those people, it's just this is going to be a really empowering episode, because sometimes when you deal with something so frequently, or you've dealt with it for so long, you don't realize how much it's like impacting your day-to-day quality of life, and that there is solutions to that, and there is ways that we can improve that on a daily basis, so you don't come to the point where you're eating like chicken, rice, and that's it, like for every meal, and it's like any variation in there and you're going to get really sick. So I'm just like really thankful, Dana, that you have kind of tackled this and looked at it a lot of times from just a woman's perspective too, because hormones play such a significant role in how we're constantly feeling, the food choices that we're making, and just like how our body is reacting to things, because it reacts in different lucky us, it doesn't even react to things the same way based on like where we are hormonally. And that's confusing.
Yes. Yeah. So let's talk about hormones. So I'm sure you all have done episodes on this in the past, but your monthly cycle is kind of like your stress report card. How's your body doing? Right. And like you mentioned, and if you use anything like a heart rate variability tracker or a watch or anything, like it can give you data on how your body is responding in different times of the month, which is really, really cool. And you can use that if you can not be like super neurotic about it, I think, because that can also be like a disordered pattern. But you can use that to be like, ooh, at this time of the month, not going to be able to train as hard as I normally do. Or you can get information about digestion stuff of it's really common when people are in the week leading up to their cycle and for the first couple of days of their cycle that they're starting to have some GI issues. But what I wanted to reiterate, and when you were talking about your friend as well, is just because something is normal for you doesn't mean that it's optimal, right? Because just because you've been having diarrhea every day for your life, that doesn't mean that it's a good thing, right? It just means that it's something that happens to you, right? Or to use a less extreme example, if you experience bloating and your bowel movements change and you have a lot of cramps and everything associated with your cycle, that may be normal for you, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be that way forever. So, a really big connection that we can see between hormones and gut stuff, right, is that if people are not moving their bowels optimally, so more than one or once or more a day, constipation isn't just something that's unpleasant to deal with, right? So the whole point of moving stools through your body is for your body to get rid of the things that it's done with, it doesn't need, we're trying to get rid of these. That can include things like hormones, protein breakdown products like ammonia, which sounds really scary, but it's just a regular breakdown product of protein, medications, supplements, all this other stuff. Your body's done with them, right? Like it's used all of the things that it needs and now we're good. Where we can run into issues is and we're going to get a little graphic here, but welcome to the poop episode with Dana, is if your stool is sitting in the colon for too long, which is what constipation is, the large intestine or the colon's job is to reabsorb things that the body may have not gotten a chance to yet. So maybe it's certain minerals and it's like, oh, we need a little bit more sodium and potassium at this time in our life. Let's make sure we've got all of it that we can out of there. Where this runs into issues hormonally is uh, having a bowel movement is the third stage of detoxification for the liver and for your hormones. So if you're reabsorbing those hormones that your body was trying to get rid of, you can start to have a lot of symptoms of estrogen dominance, which can look a lot like PMS symptoms just because you're constipated, even if the rest of your hormones and the rest of your body systems are doing fine. Where this also relates back to gut stuff is if other things like estrogen or, food, minerals, vitamins, like all the things are staying in the colon for too long, one of the things that can happen is naturally occurring good, quote unquote, bacteria that we have in our gut microbiome can start to overgrow because they have a lot of extra food in there. And so that on its own can start to create a lot of gut symptoms as well, which if you're then having those issues because you have either too much estrogen or not enough progesterone, or you're not getting rid of your regular amounts of estrogen, and now we have bacterial overgrowth as well. Now we have like a perfect storm of, well, I used to only feel bad during my, PMS time, but now I feel bad all the time. And no matter what I eat, everything hurts. And now I'm only down to 4 foods and now everything still hurts. So what am I supposed to do now?
Wow, that's wait, so I just want to be clear. Can Does it work both ways? Like your hormones can be off and that causes your digestion to be off, or your digestion can be off and that causes your hormones to be off? Can it go like both ways like that?
Yeah, it can definitely go both ways. The most common instances where this happens both ways is in something called endometriosis, which is an inflammatory condition of usually excess estrogen or estrogen dominance, which has a side effect of having a lot of different cysts and lesions and scar tissue all over the abdomen. It can be on your uterus, it can be on your bladder, it can be in your intestines, it can be anywhere. And so then in that case, for example, at certain times of the month when your estrogen is peaking, or for a lot of women with endometriosis, that'll actually happen at ovulation when your estrogen is coming down and your progesterone is going up. They'll start to notice all these different pains because their hormones are changing. And if those lesions or scar tissue are anywhere near the intestines, which of course they're going to be, you can also have a lot of GI issues. So, yes, it can work both ways.
Wow, that is like blowing my mind. I mean, it's almost like your body's just like all working together at the same time.
No way.
Like it's like it's so hard when we're trying to understand the functions of the body because it does so many things and it's doing them all simultaneously and we want to optimize all of them, but we don't freaking understand how they all work together. And it's so amazing to hear these connections, and it blows my mind that some people, can be listening to this and say, wow, I've had issues with endo for years and I never ever associated that with my gut issues. And like it just opens up possibilities of hope that like if you've tried everything else, like that kind of thing where because so many people with gut issues and hormone issues are like, well, I'm at the end of my road here. I feel like I've Googled everything. There's nothing left to Google.
Yeah. Yeah. And it gets really confusing too, because sometimes let's say the elimination diets that are recommended for gut health are directly in opposition to what the elimination diets are for hormone health. It can go both ways. And then either can be the origin of your villain origin story with the symptoms that you have right now. So, like, if you have a lot of gut issues to begin with, one of the ways that you can develop or exacerbate hormone issues is, let's talk about the thyroid, right? For one example, is if you're having gut malabsorption issues, or if there's something in your gut that's not supposed to be there, or you have very high stress, so then you have suppressed stomach acid, which inhibits your ability to absorb iron and B12 and a whole bunch of other things. It's so, so common to see that with people who have hormone issues because we need building blocks for our hormones as well. We need proteins, we need fats, we need carbohydrates, we need all these different nutrients. Your body can't just make those from nothing. So if you're not getting them from food, and sometimes if you have gut issues, even if you're eating the foods that your thyroid needs to make T3, T4, to make TSH, to make all these different things, if you're not absorbing them, your body's going to be like, now what? You know, so you may have too low a thyroid hormones, which then ironically can lead to things like constipation, cold, being really cold in your extremities all the time, slower metabolism, weight gain, losing your hair, like all these different things. And then the way that we've been taught to think about symptoms is, okay, I've now identified that I have a whole bunch of symptoms. And then a lot of the time you go to your primary care and they're like, no, nothing's wrong with you, quote unquote, because all your labs are normal, which means to them, there's nothing that's been flagged as the outside of the lab reference range. But when I work with blood work and stool testing and hormone testing and all these things with people, I'm really looking for what we could consider like an optimal functional health range, which really is going to be like the middle part of the bell curve, right? Not the tippy top, but like maybe the middle 30 to 40%. In my opinion, if you've been marked as flagged by the lab, whether high and low, you're an outlier at this point. That's been going on for a long time, and we need to figure out where that's been coming from. But then also keeping in mind that you can be outside of that optimal functional range, whatever we want to call it, and not yet at the lab range. But that's where you're going to start to see a lot of symptoms. This is where you might start to see something like we call subclinical hypothyroidism, right? Which is where people see a lot of classic, mostly hypothyroid symptoms. So too low thyroid, which is a bunch of the symptoms that I just described. But when they go to their endocrinologist or they go to their OB or they go to their, primary care or something, like, oh, your labs are fine, which part of the reason for that is because the range is way too wide, in my opinion, for TSH. And a lot of practitioners will not run the full thyroid panel unless you have something like Hashimoto's or hypothyroid in your family. And then another complicating factor can be is if you don't have the right mineral balance of like sodium and potassium, magnesium, everything like that, even if you have all of the thyroid hormones, your signaling is working well, your thyroid hormone conversion is going well. If you don't have enough potassium in the right ratio, your body's not going to be able to getting your thyroid hormones into the cells because potassium sensitizes the cells to get thyroid hormone in there. So there's, like you're mentioning before, there's just so many different connections, and it's so hard. There's no way to know everything, right? Which, you guys might be like, oh my God, there's so many connections here. Most of the time, even I feel like I know nothing when it comes to this kind of stuff. And this is, the baseline that I'm working with. So if you're feeling confused, it took me years to get here. So don't feel bad.
No, because it's one of the I think the same thing. I'm like, this is confusing, but at the same time makes so much more sense because the range for what is considered problematic is so wide. And if you're someone who is used to functioning in a realm where like, well, I just don't feel right and this isn't optimizing like my health and my daily wellness for me, like you're almost dismissed when you go to the doctors because like it's just like, well, you're healthy, you're in the healthy range, you've gotten these tests done, like you seem to be just fine. And it's like, no, like this doesn't feel healthy for me. This doesn't feel like this is what my baseline should be. And really, guys, like only you know that, and you know how you want to feel on a daily basis. And even if you've gone and you've gotten some tests that have been like, well, you're like within this normal range, and it's like, who decided this normal range? Because like my hormones don't feel like they're in a normal range. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know how you feel, and you know what type of issues you're experiencing daily, and whether it's problematic for you in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And, hormone testing is really tough too, because you have to be very precise about the time of the month that you're getting it done in order for it to be accurate. Because the thing that a lot of doctors will, if you get your hormone panel run when you go to your primary care or something like that, they're like, oh yeah, like we'll just run it when you come in for your annual physical. Typically, if you go to an endocrinologist or you go to an OBGYN, they'll be like, okay, you need to come in on day 3 of your cycle or day 16 of your cycle. Or if you're doing something like a Dutch test, which is a urine hormone panel, then they want you to do it between day 19 and 21 of your cycle, right? And then the really confusing thing is, if you go in during your follicular phase, which is the first phase of your cycle, and you get blood work done, and then a year later you go during your luteal phase, which is the second half of your cycle, you might be like, oh my God, my hormones wildly changed. But you wouldn't actually know if that's true or not because you're at a completely different time in your cycle. Whereas in the first part of your phase, estrogen is high and progesterone is low. And then when you go to the second phase, it's flipped. So it might look like, oh my gosh, yay, my progesterone is so much higher because everyone's like, yay, progesterone, it's the feel good hormone. And then estrogen, you're like, oh my God, my estrogen dipped. Like, what's happening? And you're like, well, wait a minute. I mean, it might have dipped, but we don't know because we don't have an accurate comparison. So it just adds another layer of complication in there.
I feel like I've answered my own question here because I had this stat that was like super bothering me, and I was like, I don't know if she'll be able to explain this or if anyone can really explain this, but I read that 49% of women meet the criteria for having like at least one gastrointestinal disorder, while it's only 37% of men. And that was really weird to me because I thought to myself, like, well, to me in my world, it feels like everybody has gastrointestinal issue. Like, is just, I don't know if I'm just hanging out with a lot of stressed people, a lot of type A's. I don't know what I'm doing. But it was so shocking to me that it was so far in it, because that's not a little bit. That's not 1 or 2%. You know what I mean? That's like, whoa, hold the phone. What is going on with like almost half of women? And so I wanted to ask you, if you had any theories or explanations to why this is so much more prevalent in women than it is in men. But it seems like it might have something to do with how complex our hormone cycles are and how they're constantly changing, whereas men are flatlined in so many ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
just joking, men.
No, you're not, but it's okay.
No, I'm not.
So,
not at all.
Let's talk about who gets gut issues, right? So most of the time in my practice, I'm working with women, right? I do work with some men with gut issues as well. But I think there's a lot of different factors that go into this. One is like, for the most part, women are more likely to go to the doctor and get looked at, or, something taken care of. Because men tend to be stubborn about that kind of stuff. They're like, oh, whatever, I'll just, grin and bear it. And I'm making gross generalizations here, right? But then also, yes, hormones play a big role of it. And if we're going off of those kind of branches, hormonal birth control can really contribute to liver detoxification changes and the way that our body absorbs certain nutrients. And that can contribute to certain GI issues, whether it's the mechanism of action of the medication that's contributing to GI issues, or the way that it's being broken down in the body, which then is changing some other ways that the body works, and that causes GI issues, right? Of course, more women than men are going to be diagnosed with things like endometriosis and PCOS and all these other hormone issues, which can definitely impact your GI as well. But I also think that women tend to take on a lot more stress than men. And there's a huge connection between stress and GI issues. And not just because of the butterflies that you get before an open workout or before a presentation or before anything like that. I mean, there's something called runner's trots for a reason, right? And I do work with a lot of athletes who have those kinds of things, which is where you get really nervous and then all of a sudden your body's like, "Oh, we need to evacuate right now. Like, we need to take care of this if we're about to go run a marathon," or, something like this is like, I can't be having to go to the bathroom when I'm in the middle of a competition or something, right? And that's your fight or flight response kind of kicking in. But anytime that you are in any kind of stressed out state, which becomes more complicated because a lot of people don't identify as being someone who is stressed out, but your body still gets the influx of stress hormones, even if you don't feel stressed, right? Is women tend to take on and internalize a lot more stress than men, at least from what I have seen in my clinical practice. Now, granted, I do see mostly women, so it is a little bit of a bias, right? But when that happens and when you are stressed, your body is only going to be in the sympathetic part of the nervous system. So that's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, which, even if you don't know what any of that means, that does mean that you are not in rest and digest. That means things like reproduction, digestive things, everything going on with that is becoming deprioritized. So if you are mostly in the stressed state, a lot of the time, if you're in it when you're eating around food times, your digestion is going to be compromised. And it's not your fault, first of all, because that is an involuntary reaction that your body has. It is a biological safety mechanism, right? So, one of the things that I work on a lot is nervous system regulation with my clients, because while we're working on, okay, well, where is a lot of this stuff coming from? Because for 95% of the people that I work with, the gut issues themselves are not being caused by stress, they're being exacerbated by stress. So we then start to wonder about, okay, if we're looking at our gut issues and the root cause of our gut issues and the kind of surface level causes of our gut issues, we want to think about what are all the different pieces of the pie chart, which can feel very liberating because for a lot of people, when they go to their GI or they go somewhere, they're like, oh, I think you're hearing less of it's all in your head now. But what they'll say now is that more of the same of like, oh, well, it could just be stress, right? You just have IBS, which really is a diagnosis of exclusion. They don't actually know what's wrong with you. They're like, yes, I validate your symptoms in a medical setting, and now you can have a diagnostics code. But that doesn't help me as a clinician figure out what's going on. I believe you when you tell me you have symptoms. I don't need a diagnosis code for that. So when you're having kind of the cluster of all these different things, when people come to me, it's like, okay, food may be a piece, stress may be a piece, medications may be a piece, your lifestyle may be a piece, your workouts may be a piece, your hormones may be a piece. What about your gut bacteria, right? Like, what are all these different things that are going on? And we're trying to figure out not necessarily, what percentage of the pie everything is, but what's the biggest one? And then also, what are the ones that we have the most control over, knowing that some of them we have no control over. You have no control over when your body goes into the stress response because that's an involuntary reaction. But what we do have a little bit more control over is how our body, after the event is over, we can assist it to process through that stress and get you back into rest and digest where possible and within reason, especially focusing on that around meal times so that the food that you are eating is being digested and absorbed and can turn into things like energy and hormones and everything like that.
Wow, that's incredibly helpful.
So helpful. So
It's a
helpful.
lot, but it's incredibly helpful because there is a lot that feels helpless with stress because a lot of times we're like, well, this is this is what we're doing. This is at the stress levels that we're at, and
Yeah.
trying to find ways to like mitigate that or work around that, or like, yeah, it's on the goal list, but like what that like in the moment I'm still like like having all of these other issues that is also making me stressed that I am like running to the bathroom. So like it just like all of that combined. But the idea that like no, you don't have a choice whether your body is going to go into that stress response, but you do have some things that you can do after to get yourself back into a more like homeostasis, where you can get yourself back into a spot where your body can start to recover a little bit better rather than stay into that, really stressed part. As we start to like dive into stress, I want to talk about workouts a little bit because we know that a lot of the times for workouts, we are putting ourselves under a fairly significant amount of physical stress, some more than others. And like when we work it up in our heads as well. But when it comes to gut related health issues in exercise, do you think, or is it your experience that exercise is exacerbating these symptoms? Or is there anything that people with some gut issues should be avoiding when it comes to
Mm.
exercise? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think there's a whole spectrum of answers here. I think the best thing that you can do as a person who likes to exercise is learn to check in with your body and learn what your capacity is for the day. Very similar to how we do with the menstrual cycle, right? If you're on your cycle, maybe hitting like a qualifier workout, not the best time to do that. Now you don't always have control over that, but you know, you know that you're not going to perform as well as if you were somewhere later in your cycle. So, when we are dealing with people with gut issues, a lot of the time people have good days and they have bad days in terms of their symptoms, right? Your symptoms are going wild. I feel like I'm so pregnant. It looks like I'm so pregnant. I'm so bloated. It looks like I'm 9 months pregnant, right? And obviously, pregnancy is another thing that can really exacerbate gut issues, and that could be a whole nother episode. But
Mhm.
if you're having a really severe symptom day, that is not the day to push it because you're only going to make things worse, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to just lay on the couch with a heating pad and like wait for it to pass, right? So it's really my goal for clients with this is let's meet your body where it is, see what we have the capacity for, so we don't make it worse. And then also, what are the things that we can do to help move things along? So if we're thinking on the slower bowel movement end side of things, I think it's generally a little bit more forgiving to do different kinds of workouts and stuff because exercise can help naturally move things along, right? Although I will say, disclaimer, if you haven't had a bowel movement in 3, 4, 5 days, you need to go see somebody, right? Like we need to do something about that very quickly. Not only because it's very uncomfortable, but because there could be something else going on deeper that's like, well, what if you don't go for 2 weeks or something like that? That's going to be wildly uncomfortable, right? But exercise and especially different kinds of gentle movement. So whether you're jumping on the bike, you're going for a walk, maybe not a run, pounding the pavement, maybe not the best idea unless you're going on an air runner. Like that might be okay, right? But even things like doing a CrossFit workout or doing some lifting or stuff like that can be helpful because you're going to be mobilizing those core muscles as well. And then your large compound muscle groups, which can help kind of gently move things along. If you're on the other end of things and you tend to have a lot of looser stools, that's where we need to be more careful. Nobody should be doing Jackie when you have diarrhea all day, right? Because are we doing 50 thrusters? Are we doing all that rowing? Are
Did
we
you
going to do
hear
all that
that,
running?
friend?
You want me to say it again? No. I mean, so it kind of depends on what your gym or what your program has for the day, right? If you're just lifting, you might be okay, right? It's so dependent on the person, but definitely don't be doing any crazy hit training or like cardio. You might want to be very, very careful of training like in a hot room or something like that. So if you're having a lot of loose stools or diarrhea or anything, that's extremely dehydrating. So, a blanket recommendation that I can give, and I don't give these often, so take it, is electrolytes, right? If you are like having loose stools, and especially if you're having them multiple times per day, is extremely dehydrating. So you need to rehydrate with water, and you're also going to need some kind of electrolytes. Preferably something that has like a little bit of a higher salt content in it. So something like Liquid IV or Element, or any of those other kinds of things. Make sure you're adding extra salt to your food, because if you're low on minerals and you're having very fast bowel movements, there's a very higher likelihood that you're going to get really dizzy during your workout and potentially pass out, which is not good. And if that ever happens to you, you did too much, right? That doesn't mean you have to beat yourself up about it. It's just like, okay, data point. That was a little too much for me. Let's not do that next time. But gentle movement is always going to be really helpful. And gentle is relative, right? If you're like a games athlete, then doing a regular class and just trying to not murder yourself might be a gentle movement for you. Whereas somebody who's just coming into the gym for the first time, they might do the same workout and they're sore for 2 weeks, right? So it's really relative, but the more severe your symptoms are, the more you will relatively need to pull back. And this is really hard, especially for us type A, CrossFit, Ollie people, and everything like that, because we always want to push it, right? We're like, I want to do better. I want to get faster. I want to lift heavier. I want to do all the things. But if you try to do that when you're having a lot of GI issues, you're only going to make yourself feel worse, especially because high intensity exercise, the way that it works in the body, and we think about, muscle growth and building and everything like that. When we exercise, we do make these minor, like tiny tears in our muscles, and then we repair, they get bigger or they get stronger. The same thing happens in the lining of our small intestine. But unless you're able to eat and absorb the different proteins and amino acids and different nutrients that you need to repair the lining of the small intestine and repair and rebuild it, not going to be good. And your gut issues are only going to get worse, which can lead to more malabsorption and less energy. And then you're going to start to see less gains and less performance and everything like that. So what's crazy is, for a lot of people, once they fix their gut issues, their performance goes way up. And it's not just because they're able to absorb more of their food, they're able to have more energy that they can utilize. Your whole life is going to get better when you can have less, or when you have more regular bowel movements, right? Because your quality of life has gone up, which means your mood is going to be better, because we haven't even talked about the gut brain connection or anything like that. But we could definitely go there if you guys want to. But there's so many ways that we can work on, if your ultimate goal is improving your health, improving your performance in the gym, whatever it is, we want to look at, okay, well, what are all of the building blocks that contribute to this? Yes, of course, nutrition, recovery, sleep, training, all the things like that. But what are the things that are impacting your ability to absorb the nutrition that you're getting? What are the things that are impacting the amount of water or electrolytes or minerals that you need to drink, in addition to your training and the way that you recover? So,
oh man, I remember Kelsey, all I could think about that whole entire time that she was talking was just like, I've lived this, not me personally. I've watched it in my husband. And I remember, I don't know if you remember, Dana, but like I had mentioned on our last podcast together that like me and my husband had been very like into CrossFit, and he had done a Whole30 and he got sick. And he's never fully recovered. And I remember the first time that he realized that high intensity workouts were going to annihilate him. He had been CrossFitting for years. And after he got sick, anything that he did that was high intensity just sent him like through the roof. Like he was on the floor, white as a ghost. Like he was not even recognizable, especially core things like toes to bar, or like anything where he was contracting his core was like, it annihilated him. And I remember those first couple times where he was so sick and he didn't know why. And he was like, I don't know. I never drink Gatorade, but that's all I need right now. Can someone go get me a Gatorade? Like I'm so sick and that's all my brain is telling me that I need. And of course, when you're saying the electrolytes thing, I'm like, oh my God, it all makes so much sense. But it took him a really, really long time to come to terms with the fact that that kind of exercise was not going to fit in his life anymore. And it was so hard because like you said, he's that type A personality and, just push everything. And it's really, really hard to back down from that. But I think you're so right in just knowing yourself and like checking in with your body and saying like, what can we do today? And not what can't we do? What can we do today to move and feel good without, getting so incredibly sick? Are you listening, friend? Friend. Because Mark knows, but so you mentioned, I did have it on my list. You mentioned the brain gut connection, and I feel like we got to talk about it. You had mentioned last time it was called the vagus nerve. I wrote it down because I was like, I have to hear more about this. Can you explain a little bit more to our listeners how these two systems are intertwined, and like when people say like, are you talking yourself into symptoms? Like, is that real, or are they gaslighting you?
Yeah, it can be both. Yes. Okay, so the gut brain connection, which is the kind of colloquial name for the vagus nerve and what's called the enteric nervous system, gut brain connection from here on out, right? Is the whole reason why talking about stress and working on stress, quote unquote, is so impactful for gut issues. So when we look at the gut brain connection, this is a bi-directional thing. The easiest way to explain this is when you have something like runner's trots, or you get really nervous before a presentation or a meeting, or whatever it is, and you can feel kind of like butterflies in your stomach. That's the gut brain connection at work. And the other direction is if you're having something like loose stools multiple times a day, or if you're really constipated, if things are not feeling well below the waistline, do you think you're really going to want to go out and hang out with your friends and like do outgoing things? No, because you don't feel good. So your body's like, you need to sit down and take a break until we feel better, right? And that's kind of the way that it manifests in the body. But what's actually happening internally is the gut is responsible for helping you produce and absorb the nutrients for a whole lot of different neurotransmitters, right? So these are kind of like your feel good chemicals. So there's dopamine, there's serotonin, there's a whole bunch of other different like amino acid or protein related hormones that are going to be fueled by the things that are absorbed in the gut. And it's back and forth. So there's a stat that's like 80% of your serotonin is housed in your gut or produced in your gut. And it's something like 80 to 90% of the immune system is in the gut as well. So that's why gut health is such a kind of exploding area right now. And
I just love that fact that I had no idea about the serotonin in your gut health. Like, no wonder why it's affecting your mood, friend.
Yes.
Friend.
Yes, exactly.
SOS.
Friend. Well, yeah. So, I mean, when we talk about mental health as well, there's a huge, if you know anyone who's been diagnosed with anxiety, depression, PTSD, bipolar, borderline personality disorder, like any of these things, almost every single one of those people, I can guarantee you, has gut issues as well because of that gut brain connection. Because when we look at those things, there's a kind of for a lot of people, there's a kind of chemical imbalance or disturbance, or it may be that they haven't been able to absorb the nutrients that their body needs to produce serotonin, dopamine, any of these regulating neurotransmitters, that has then resulted in them feeling extremely depressed, anxious, fill in all of the blanks of things. And it can also be that if there's something that's imbalanced in the terrain with your gut that makes it a hostile environment for your body to produce the things that your body needs to regulate your mood, that alone can create some kind of imbalance, which creates a decrease in things like serotonin, dopamine, all these other things, which can then lead to potentially a mental health diagnosis. Is it going to be the only thing that's leading to it? Most likely not. Mental health is very complicated, just like gut health is very complicated. But those are one of the things that I really like to make sure that I'm checking off on. And I will say, I don't have a specific statistic on this, but like clinically and anecdotally, almost every single person that I have ever worked with on gut issues, they have either come to me already having worked with a therapist, or I recommend that they work with a therapist as well. Because I mean, I'm a dietitian, right? There's only so much that I can do on the stress or especially the trauma piece of things. So I do work from what's called like a trauma informed approach. but I can't treat trauma. I'm not a therapist, right? So while I can acknowledge that there are a lot of things that have happened to you in your past or currently happening to you that actually really interestingly, and we'll go there next, can influence the development of your gut microbiome and then your neurotransmitters and your mental health as well. I can't do anything about the things that have happened in the past. I can help you figure out what's going on in the future, but a lot of the time, until we're able to do, or in the future, in the present, until we're able to work on what's going on right now and what has happened to you in the past in conjunction, that can be a huge mental and then also physical block, because that's where the nervous system comes in and is connecting your gut and the brain. And if there's a disconnect there or there's a block for some reason, then we can restore your gut bacteria. Like we can, work on all these different kinds of things and you still may be having symptoms. And I just want to reiterate there, like, that's not your fault, because way too many people come to me after having gone to functional medicine doctors or other people who specialize in GI, but they've basically just been given a list of foods that they shouldn't eat or a low FODMAP diet or something like that. And they're like, well, I must be causing myself my symptoms because I've been eating the foods that I was told not to eat. And again, we go back to like the first thing that I said on our episode today is like, if food is not the origin of the problem, food cannot be looked to as the end all be all solution. If that was the thing, that you would have felt better way long ago eliminating all those foods and you never would have had any issues ever again. But that's not the case. So it can be really, really difficult, especially when we're dealing with, when people come with a big history of mental health stuff, whether it's trauma, it's stress, it's anxiety, it's depression, everything like that. There's a lot of really fascinating studies on what's called a high ACEs score, so adverse childhood experiences, so trauma experienced when you were young, and how that really directly impacts the hypersensitivity of the nerves that are in the gut, meaning that foods that may be typically digested pretty well by some people, let's use beans or like broccoli as an example. If you eat a ton of beans or broccoli and you're not used to it, yeah, you're going to be farty, right? You're going to have some gas, you're going to have all this other stuff. For someone who has a high ACEs score, to use beans and broccoli as an example, it might take them out. They cannot eat that at all, because when they were young, that early childhood experience, the way that it adversely affected the development of their nervous system, their body was developed to be on high alert to threats, and that has settled into their GI. And unless you do a lot of work on that with a whole bunch of different practitioners, which can be like pelvic floor physical therapy, working with a gut dietitian, working with a GI doctor, working with, all these other things, because you're never only going to see gut issues with someone with a high ACE score. And even someone who doesn't have a high ACE score, because the only way that you would know that is if you've been working on specific like childhood trauma in therapy. There's so many people who don't realize all of the different events that happened to them earlier in their life that have then led up to gut issues currently, especially people who have a big history of dieting or child athletes or college athletes, like, CrossFit athletes, like all of us are, because there are so many different like body aesthetic standards that are tied into that. And when you have body image issues, it leads to having food issues. And that on its own can create a lot of GI issues, both in the moment when it's happening, or if you had an eating disorder 10 years ago. I might still see you in my office now with a lot of GI issues, even if you haven't been engaging in those eating disorder behaviors for years.
Whoa.
Rachel, your eyes are like,
I'm just blown away. Like, I knew that question was going to be like, mind blowing in the way of like everything working together. But that is like next level of just how many things go into your gut health and how many things can be affected. And it's just that whole entire thing was just mind blowing to me. And I think that when we really give it the complexity that it deserves, so many people feel so much more vindicated. And that is what I'm just here for, that, because I feel like people with gut issues, that's the number one thing that they like want. They just want vindication as like, this is a real thing and this is happening to me, and somebody acknowledge this, wow, that's beyond. Can you believe that, Kels?
No, I mean, I do 100%
Well,
believe
yeah.
that, and, like, I didn't even consider people with a high A score and contributing that to the digestive issues or gut health issues, and I love that you threw in the pelvic floor in there as well, because I think one of those things is, like, we know those are all very much connected, because we're like, "Oh, that this is my belly," like, we can see it in
Yeah.
that way, but they're often diagnosed or treated in so many different lanes that, like, you're only going to treat like your hormonal issues over here, you're only going to treat your like gut issues over here, you're only going to treat your trauma over here. So, like, being just like, thank you for being like a trauma informed caregiver,
Yes.
first of all,
Yes.
because it's one of those things that, like, every every practitioner I mean, if we all approached things from a really trauma informed perspective, we could connect with a lot more people in understanding, not even necessarily understanding their experience, but being able to treat them as a whole person, because trauma is going to affect almost every aspect of your life. And if
Mhm.
you have gut health issues and you're like, well, my like stress or my trauma is not contributing to this at all, it's like, whoa, let's back that up a little bit, because like that has had long lasting effects on your ability to even digest food or your reaction to food and how extreme it might be, because that has it's changed it, like, I don't want to say forever, but it's when you're 20 years past what you feel like what you feel like is a traumatic event for you, you don't even kind of circle back to the fact that, like, I have not been able to, like, my body is not able to digest this.
Yeah, because it doesn't feel like a safe space for your body.
Yeah.
Um, and I find, speaking of a safe space, I find that the number one thing that a lot of my clients tell me is the most helpful thing that I do for them, aside from digging deep into the labs and making sure they feel better and everything like that, is from the very first session, I always try to make sure that people understand that I'm here for them. I'm validating what they're saying. Tell me about your experience. Tell me what it's like to live in your body, because I don't know. We're just meeting now. I mean, we have met once before, but when you work with someone new, especially when they've been through the ringer of trying to figure it out on their own and all these different practitioners and being like, no, you're fine. It's just IBS or blah, 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 or, whatever it is. It's no, you have a story and your story is valid because you have that lived experience. And my job is to help you figure out, okay, with all of these puzzle pieces that we have together, when they're all spread out, how do they fit together, right? Just like we've talked about them on the podcast today, what are your connections between the hormone stuff over here and the gut stuff over here and the trauma over here and the stress over here and the mental health stuff and the food and the exercise, and how does this all fit together? And then on the one side of understanding how it all fits together, but then also, okay, well, what do I do about it now? Like, and what do we do about it in the short term? Because understanding is very helpful and being heard and meeting my clients where they are is very helpful. But what are you going to do about it at the end of the day? And so it's figuring out, okay, what are the short term things that we can do aside from just the relief of being heard, which is a massive stress reliever. Some people tell me that even just having that one experience of being able to talk it all out, feeling heard, me saying, I'm going to meet you where you are, take the stress of trying to figure this out off your plate and give it to me, because that is literally my job and that's what you're hiring me for, right? That alone can be a massive stress reliever. That can sometimes reduce a little bit of symptoms in the beginning, right? And then aside from that, it's putting things in place to, okay, let's figure out what your villain origin story is for your current symptoms, right? We're going to go after the big baddies first, not baddies in a good way, baddies in a bad way. And then trying to figure out, okay, well, where did a lot of this come from, right? Here's where we are now. And then we back it up. What can we do about this now? And then while we're figuring out the different things that we can do about this now, whether it's nutrition, it's supplements, it's liver support, it's hormone support, it's nervous system support, it's maybe also doing some additional testing or looking at the testing that you have right now, seeing, are there nutrient deficiencies? Do you have an excess of gut bacteria? Are there, more often than not, I see not enough gut bacteria because people have limited the foods that they have been eating, completely understandably, because they're trying to manage their own symptoms. But that's what's really hard about when people come to me with limited diets and they're afraid to add in new foods because they're like, but every time I eat anything else, I get symptoms. And I'm like, Yeah, and we need to figure out what your new safe foods, or how we can build out your safe foods to have more variety, because you need that to feed the bacteria in your gut, because otherwise you're going to feel like this way for a very long time. And my goal for clients is always the least amount of symptoms with the maximum amount of food and nutrient variety. I'm never trying to take more foods away from people, because on the one hand, that can be very triggering even if you don't have a history of, disordered eating or anything like that. But it's also so freeing for people to hear that cutting out foods isn't going to fix all your issues, you know? And this is coming from someone who has celiac disease. Like, I get it. There are certain there are certain foods that in certain conditions, you do need to take them out, right? Like, you'll never hear me say that if you have a peanut allergy, you should be eating things that are going to cause you to be allergic. I would lose my license right off the bat, right there, right? So please don't use that as a sound clip, because that would be really bad for me. But, but you know what I mean, right? So it's trying to figure out, how can we create more safety in this space, both from a client practitioner experience, but also how can we create more safety in your body? Because the more safety that you can create, and this is what it all comes down to, right? The more of a safe space that you can create in your body and in your environment, the more your body is primarily going to be in rest and digest, which ultimately is healing mode. It's digesting, it's healing, it's reproduction, it's hormone production, it's all those different things. Fight or flight, freeze or fawn is absolutely necessary. We would all be dead without it. But at the same time, we biologically are not designed to primarily live over there, because it's purely for survival in the moment, right here, right now. And another thing I do want to leave people with today is, like, I don't want you to feel like you have to get rid of your stressors in order to make progress on your symptoms, because one, the research shows that is not true. Two, it's not realistic. Like, you're like, oh, well, my kids are stressing me out. My job is stressing me out. I'm just going to go live on a deserted island by myself. Like, it's
Get
not
rid of
realistic.
them.
And what's actually really empowering as well is, like, even if you did that, but you didn't do any of the nervous system regulation and the processing post stress and everything, you would still be very symptomatic. So it's, on the one hand, figuring out what are the tools and coping skills that I can put in place that make my body more resilient, so that when I do run into stress, it's going to affect me a little bit less. And then on the other end of things, knowing that I can't get rid of 99% of my stress, or the way that my body responds to stress, what are the coping tools that I can use on the other side that basically helps me complete the stress cycle, which is one of my favorite books that I highly recommend. Is called Burnout by Emily and Amelia Nagoski. Highly recommend people check that out, because it explains the concept that I'm talking about right now. But it's how you can complete your own stress cycle, so that basically what you have as like a little snowball at the beginning of the week doesn't turn into a full-fledged snowman with a whole bunch of gut and hormonal issues by the end of the week, the month, the year, 5, 10 years from now.
Yeah, I mean, if that isn't everything, and I just want to say thank you, for being such a safe space for people, because I can't even tell you how many women listened to your last episode and reported back that they spoke to someone about a gut related issue and they were prescribed weight loss. And there's so many things going on there, but like the fact that you provide this space that allows people to explain their story, talk about and validate their symptoms, and then also use this weight inclusive care. You're doing the good work, girl. And I know that the girls are going to absolutely love this episode, and I want them to know where they can hear more from you. So tell them where to find you.
Yeah, last thing, losing weight is not going to fix your gut issues. So don't worry about that, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, all the places you can find me. If you want to hear more podcasts and stuff like this, and Kelsey was also on an episode with us, it's Wholehearted Eating podcast. If you go to my Instagram, which is Dana Monsees _CNS, all the links are there, and that's primarily where I hang out. I mean, mostly I'm on the podcast every week, sometimes more than once a week. We have a Patreon like membership site where we also do bonus content every week, long episodes, everything like that. So if you like the podcast and you want even more, bonus content for us. You can find it there. Yeah, if you've got gut issues, if you've got hormonal issues, if you want somebody to talk to, or potentially wonder about what it's like to work with me, I have a free 15-minute discovery call that's also linked on my website or on my Instagram. A lot of you came to talk to me after that past episode, and I loved speaking with all of you. So that was really fun. So flood my inbox if you want to. But yeah, so you can find me realfoodwithdana.com, Wholehearted Eating Podcast, or Instagram / all the social media at Dana Monsees _CNS. You could also just pick one of those, and all of the links will be there too.
Perfect. We'll include that in our show notes too, just so you have an easy find to Dana, because like every time, honestly, Dana, every time I talk to you, I'm like, I could do this for so long because you have such a wealth of knowledge. I just want to shut up the whole time. So definitely check out Dana and hear more from her. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you again for having me. I'm happy to come back anytime.